I'd like to go over something that we use a lot in calculus, the difference quotient. And in addition to that, it also uses trig identities. So my difference quotient is this thing right here. And actually, they nicely gave it, they gave the actual equation to you, the difference quotient of sine. What this problem is asking you to do is show that that second thing that I just outlined in green is equal to this thing in blue. So the first thing I want you to notice in this thing in green is that I have a sine of x plus h. That sine of x plus h can actually be used, that can be rewritten using one of our sum formulas. And the sum formula that we're going to use is the sine of something plus something else, or alpha plus beta is the one that we use. That is going to be written as sine of alpha times cosine of beta plus cosine of alpha times sine of beta. So we now have the formula that we're going to use. And the other thing that we know is if we have sine of x plus h, in that case, my alpha is going to be x, my beta is going to be h. So that entire thing can be rewritten. I'll show you right here. I'll circle this and kind of color code it. So that whole entire thing can be rewritten as sine of x times cosine of h plus cosine of x times sine of h. So now that's only the sine of x plus h part of it. I then have minus sine of x. This is going to be all over h. Now, usually when you're doing this type of problem, you will have things that cancel out or things that simplify down. Unfortunately, in this one, you don't have any of that stuff. That's what makes this problem pretty challenging. So rather than trying to cancel things out, what we're going to do is we are going to try to manipulate this problem that we have and get what we had, what the end result is that they gave you. So that's what the goal is going to be for this one. So it looks pretty intimidating, but the first thing I want you to notice is that the first term of this, cosine of x times sine of h over h, is really, really similar to the middle part of this, and that actually is over h2. So we can actually use that. The second part of this sine of x times 1 minus cosine h over h, that's a little bit more complicated to work with, but since we know what the end result of this is, we can figure out that the other two parts of that of this big humongous fraction are going to give us that. And I do want you to notice that the things that I just circled in green both have a sine of x in them, which means that we are able to factor out a sine of x. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this. And the first part of it, I'm just going to rewrite it so that my cosine of x, sine of h is first. The second part of it, I'm actually going to take these things in green and I'm going to factor out a sine because I can see that this thing that I have right here in green has a sign in front of a fraction. So I'll show you what I get when I do that. You might be able to see something that I'm not doing, and that's fine. So then if I were to rewrite that, I would get sine of x times cosine of h minus 1. This, by the way, is still all over h. So I want you to notice that this part that I have in green is very, very, very similar to what I have up here. The only issue with that is that the thing above that's circled has a 1 minus cosine of h, whereas the thing below has a cosine of h minus 1. In order to account for that, what I can do is I can factor out a negative 1. If in the beginning you factored out a negative sine x, that actually would have given you the same result. So my next step I'm going to get is going to be cosine of x sine of h minus sine of x times negative cosine of h plus 1. This is all over h. Keep in mind that negative cosine of h plus 1 is the same as 1 minus cosine of h, just a different way to write it. The next thing I'm going to do is split this up into two parts. The first part is cosine of x sine of h over h. Keep in mind, by the way, that when you have something added or subtracted on the top of a fraction and only one thing on the bottom, make sure that you keep this stuff over h and also this stuff over h. Don't lose the h for the second part. So I have cosine x sine of h over h. Then I get, I'm going to worry about my minus in just a minute. Then I get plus a negative sine of x. I'm going to reorder the stuff inside the parentheses, times 1 minus cosine of h. This is all over h. I hope that you notice now that it looks a lot more similar to what we wanted to get for our end result. So I'm just going to kind of rewrite it the way that they have it there as my end result. The first one I can rewrite, the first term I can rewrite as cosine of x times sine of h over h. The second one, I'm going to bring the negative sine x out front, so I get minus sine of x times 1 minus cosine of h, also over h. If you want to rewrite that, that last part without the parentheses, that's completely fine if you want to be exact and make sure that it looks exactly like what you have above. However, if you were to do a hard problem like this and you got all the way to the previous step, I would give you full credit on that because this is a tough problem.